Welcome to the AARDY.compare.com YouTube channel for travel tips. I'm Jonathan Breeze, the CEO, and today's question: can you explain primary versus secondary travel medical coverage? Well, whenever you compare travel insurance policies for an important trip, you'll want to understand the ins and outs of the medical coverage they offer, including whether you have primary or secondary coverage. Getting sick or injured overseas is scary enough on its own. Understanding a bit about how your travel insurance medical plans operate can save you time and stress if the worst happens. Here's the basics. The first thing you'll need to understand is the difference between primary and secondary coverage. Simply put, primary coverage is a policy that will pay you first when you file a medical claim. If the medical coverage you purchase is classified as primary, it will pay you first in the event of a claim whether you have another policy or not. The simple version of secondary coverage is that it begins to pay on a medical claim after the primary coverage is exhausted. It pays after any other benefits have been paid to you. Secondary coverage will pay deductibles, co-payments, and any other covered out-of-pocket expenses up to the maximum extent of the policy. If you do not have any other medical coverage, the secondary policy will become your primary policy by default. This is one of the reasons that primary coverage is not necessarily superior to secondary coverage. It all depends on your individual situation and the specific provider. Now here's a closer look. Travel insurance medical coverage works a bit differently than dedicated health insurance plans. If you're injured or become ill overseas, you'll have to pay your bills up front and submit documentation for reimbursement afterwards. In the case of injury or illness whilst travelling abroad, be sure to notify your travel insurance provider as soon as possible. This will simplify the claim process. And while primary coverage is not always superior to secondary coverage, it can sometimes make payment easier if you have to make a claim. Some companies offer primary coverage that will arrange for payment in advance to help you gain admission to a hospital. A secondary coverage provider will not normally make such advance arrangements for you. As always, make sure you read your policy carefully and ask your travel insurance carrier if something is not clear to you. And as for price comparison, or when contemplating travel insurance medical coverage, do not simply assume that primary coverage will be substantially more expensive than secondary coverage. The cost of a policy depends on many factors. Make sure to compare policies closely and always include the specific details of your trip. When doing these detailed policy comparisons, you will sometimes find that primary coverage does not cost much more than secondary coverage. Again, it all depends on the policy, your coverage needs, and the specific details of your trip. Sometimes for just a few dollars more than you would pay for a secondary coverage, you can have the extra convenience and security of a primary plan. It is crucial to take the time to weigh your options carefully. Doing the work in advance before the event of an illness or injury can save you huge amounts of time, energy, and money. At AARDY Compare, find even more answers to your questions about travel medical coverage. You'll also find a completely free and simple to use comparison tool to sniff out some of the very best travel insurance plans from the top travel US providers. Safe travels.